They called my daughter a waste of potential behind closed doors. My own parents over a school that wasn't Ivy enough. They disinvited her from Christmas. Said space was tight. It wasn't. There were 18 seats. Just not one for her. So I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I made calls. Lots of them, and on Christmas Eve, my phone rang again. My mother in a rage. What the hell did you say to them? But it was too late. The house was already full of people who chose kindness, of those who chose my daughter. And the silence that followed, it finally felt like peace. I had just ended the call when Maya walked through the door, cheeks flushed pink from the December cold, a proud grin lighting up her face. Got the last bottle at the third store, she said, holding it up like a trophy. Grandpa's second favorite. I tried 5 places for the usual, but no luck. I can check later, though. She was proud of it, genuinely proud. That mid-range red wine probably cost her more in gas than it did at the register, but she didn't care. To her, it wasn't about price. It was about tradition, about showing up with something meaningful, about being part of the family. I stood in the kitchen, hands pressed flat on the counter, still reeling from the call I had just ended. My mother's voice had started off sweet, fake sweet, the kind she used when she was about to drop something sharp. We've invited so many guests this year, she'd said breezily. It's going to be very tight. Then came the real blow. We were wondering if maybe could just sit this one out. Just this year, she added it quickly, like that would soften it. You're still welcome, of course. It's not personal, but it was, and I knew it the second I heard my father's voice in the background, unfiltered, unapologetic, tell her losers don't get invited to Christmas. His voice was followed by the faint sound of laughter. Then another voice. My nephew, the golden child. Isn't she going to that backup med school? What's it called again? Mediocre state. My mother tried to hush them, but the damage was done. She didn't stop them. She just whispered, you can't say it like that. Which meant she knew it was cruel, but said nothing to stop it. I didn't respond with grace. I didn't offer a rebuttal. I just hit the red button and stood there like I'd been unplugged from everything. My hands were still cold when Maya walked in, holding that bottle of wine like it was her ticket into belonging. She had no idea what had just happened. She set the Winnie on the counter with a flourish and shrugged off her coat. You wouldn't believe how crowded the stores are. I think Christmas shopping is getting worse every year. She laughed to herself, then pulled a small box from her backpack, wrapped in red paper and tied with a slightly crooked gold ribbon. And I wrapped Grandma's gift, too. It's that tea she likes. Took forever to track it down, but I found it online. She was beaming, hopeful. Her hands moved with care as she adjusted the ribbon and smoothed out the paper. I stared at her, this girl who had done everything right. She worked hard. She made thoughtful choices. She picked a medical school she could afford, one that wouldn't bury her in debt. And somehow that made her a loser in their eyes. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I couldn't. The truth was too sharp, too fresh. I just nodded, pretending like I was listening, like my heart wasn't splintering inside my chest. Maya kept chatting, excited about the holidays, about seeing everyone. She didn't notice the silence in my responses. Or maybe she did and was giving me space the only way she knew how, by keeping the joy alive. As the evening light faded and snow dusted the edges of the windows, Maya settled on the living room floor, wrapping gifts with holiday music playing softly in the background. She looked peaceful, content. I watched her from the kitchen, unseen, clutching the edge of the counter like it was the only thing keeping me upright. My daughter was preparing token to a room that no longer wanted her. Still believing that her place there was secure. Still believing effort earned love, and I was trying to figure out how to tell her it didn't. It wasn't the first time someone in this family had been left out of Christmas. Years ago, I'd been the one uninvited, only they hadn't said it outright back then. It was quieter, more polite. I was 24, visibly pregnant with Maya, unmarried, and entirely unwelcome. The official excuse was that there wasn't enough room at the table, that the guest list had already been finalized. But I knew better. I could hear it in the way my mother's voice tightened when she said the word expecting, like it tasted bitter. I could see it in how my father refused to look me in the eye when I told him I was keeping the baby. It had been their way of punishing me, of making sure I understood I'd fallen out of grace. And now, all these years later, they were doing it again. Not to me this time, but to Maya. I walked into the hallway, leaned against the wall, and stared at a photo of Maya from her high school graduation. Bright-eyed, head high, the world in front of her. It hit me then. They never really forgave me for having her. And maybe they never saw her as a full part of the family because of it. Maybe to them she would always be the child of a mistake. The thought made my stomach twist. Back in the living room, Maya was humming to herself, cutting pieces of wrapping paper with a precision I could never manage. Her presence filled the house with a kind of light that made it almost impossible to believe what I knew was true. How do you tell someone that their very existence has always been quietly resented? I didn't want to. I didn't want a beta one to take that sparkle out of her eyes. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Hope you understand. It's really just about logistics. Logistics. I turned off the screen and tossed it onto the counter. I thought about all the ways I could respond. A dignified silence, a carefully worded message, a full-blown confrontation. But each option came with the same cost. Maya's heartbreak. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to breathe. There was no good way through this. Then, like a film reel, memories started playing behind my eyes, one in particular sharp as glass. It was months ago. Maya had just gotten her acceptance letters, several of them, one from a prestigious Ivy League university that my parents would have practically thrown a parade for. Another from a solid local med school, not flashy, but respected and with a generous scholarship. I remember the night she told me her decision. We were sitting on the porch, a soft breeze in the air. The kind of night where you feel like anything's possible. I'm staying local, she'd said almost casually. I blinked. But the four I know, but I want to stay close to home. And they offered me a scholarship. I don't want loans. I saw what it did to you, Mom. That last part knocked the air out of me. I never told you that because I didn't want you to feel bad, she added quietly. But I remember the bills, the stress, the sacrifices. I don't want that. I want you to have some peace for once. Twist. All this time I thought he had shielded her from the worst of my struggle. But she had seen it all. And she had made her decision not because she wasn't good enough for the Ivy, but because she loved me enough to choose peace over prestige. And now they were punishing her for it. I looked at her, still glowing in the warm living room light, completely unaware that the very choice she made out of love had become the reason she was being excluded. My chest tightened. No, this couldn't stand. Not again. Not like this. Later that night, when the house had quieted and Maya had gone to her room, still humming, still hopeful, I made the mistake of opening social media. It wasn't looking for trouble. Honestly, I think I was searching for distraction, something light, something numb. Instead, I found Zachary's latest post. Zachary, my nephew, the golden child, future lawyer, private school darling. A face so familiar in family photo albums, you'd think he was the main character. He had posted a meme, a cartoon image of a toy doctor set, the kind toddlers play with, captioned, graduates from Crestwell Med like, I diagnose you with vibes. I froze. Underneath the post were dozens of laughing emojis, comments from his classmates, friends, even a few cousins chiming in. Do they even use real cadavers or just Google images? I think my dentist went there explains a lot. I heard all you need to apply is a library card in a dream. But what really made my stomach drop was the tiny thumb icon underneath. My father had liked the post. He didn't just see it. He approved of it. My hands trembled slightly as I took the screenshot. I didn't know why I needed to save it, but I did. Some part of me needed proof, something tangibly to confirm I wasn't overreacting, that this wasn't just in my head. This wasn't indifference. This wasn't silence. This was mockery. Sanctioned, shared, and liked. I scrolled back up to the post and stared at it for a long moment. My mind played cruel tricks, overlaying Maya's face onto that cartoon, imagining her scrolling, seeing it, realizing what her own family thought of her. My stomach turned. She hadn't seen it yet. She was still in her room, probably finishing up her gift wrapping. Earlier, she had spent an hour fussing over the tea she bought for my mother, her grandmother. It was a limited edition holiday blend from a boutique brand, something they'd bonded over for years. A little tradition between the two of them. Maya had ordered it 2 weeks ago, tracked the shipping like a hawk, and practically skipped to the mailbox the day it arrived. This one's her favorite, she had said earlier that evening, holding the tin with both hands. She mentioned it back in October. I remembered. She wrapped it slowly, carefully. No creases, neat corners, a silver bow on top. Then she placed it into the cloth bag she'd picked out just for the occasion. The card she wrote was tucked inside, too. I'd seen the envelope sealed with a sticker shaped like a snowflake. I didn't know what it said, but I knew Maya. It was probably something like, "Thank you for always believing in me." My throat tightened. She had no idea. To her, they were still the same people who sent her birthday cards, who smiled at her during family dinners, who nodded with pride when she mentioned her future. She didn't know they were laughing behind her back. She didn't know they had decided she wasn't worthy, not because of her character, her work ethic, or her kindness, but because she chose a school that didn't stroke their egos. I sat in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the glow of my phone screen, trying to make sense of the ache in my chest. There wasn't a word for it. Not quite betrayal, not quite grief, just a deep hollow knowing. They hadn't just excluded her, they were laughing about it, and somehow that hurt even more. The next morning, while the kettle whistled on the stove and Ma slept in, I received a message from an old acquaintance, Sophie, a woman I hadn't spoken to in years, but who had once been a staple at family dinners. She was always kind to Mia, always remembered her birthday, and had a soft voice that never quite matched the sharpness of the company she kept. Her text was short. "I think you should see this." Attached was a screenshot of a group chat I recognized. My mother's inner circle. A mix of cousins, longtime friends, and academic colleagues who had somehow become family through sheer repetition. The message at the center of the screenshot was from Zachary. "Is Thelaser coming this year? Don't want to sit through another Cresswell sob story." A few laughing emojis followed. A gif of a cartoon throwing up. Someone had responded with, "Hope not." Space is tight this year, right? No one corrected them. No one defended her. My stomach twisted. It was all a joke to them, a running gag. And Maya was the punchline. I stared at the screen trying to breathe. Sophie had included a final message. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize it had gotten this bad." I didn't laugh. For the record, I just wanted you to know it was the final crack, the moment when rage turned into resolve. I had been silent too long, protecting too many feelings that clearly never included mine or Myers. She deserved the truth. She deserved to know what they thought, even if it shattered the illusion she'd so lovingly built. So I climbed the stairs, paused at her door, and knocked gently. "Come in," came her voice, soft and unaware. She was sitting cross-legged on her bed, wrapping a final gift, a book for her grandfather, bookmarked with a ribbon. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, then dimmed slightly when she registered my face. I sat on the edge of the bed. "No theatrics, no preamble. I need to tell you something," I said. I told her everything. The call, the words, the meme, the group chat. My father's like, my nephew's smug mockery, the absence of outrage from people who should have known better, the fake excuses, the cruel truth. Maya didn't interrupt. She didn't flinch. She listened with the same poise she'd shown since she was little, eyes steady, hands folded in her lap. When I finished, I waited for something. Anger, tears, reassurance. Instead, she stood up, walked to her door, and closed it gently behind me. No slam, no scream, just finality. I stood there for a moment, frozen. Somehow, her silence hurt more than anything she could have said. It was dignity laced with devastation. I walked back downstairs, heart hammering. Something in me shifted. I had spent so long walking the tightrope, balancing between keeping peace and protecting Maya. That rope was gone now. They didn't just exclude her. They ridiculed her. And now they didn't get to have her. Not her presence, not her effort, not her wine, or her tea, or her carefully written cards. I opened my laptop and found the email my mother had sent weeks ago. Christmas dinner, confirm allergies. 18 names listed in cheerful bullet points. I read each one carefully. Some were family. some were longtime friends. Some had known me since I was Maya's age. I pulled out a notebook, wrote down all 18 names, and underlined them slowly, one by one. This time, the call wouldn't be to confirm allergies. This time, I was going to ask them to choose. I started with the easiest name on the list, Margot. She was my godmother, though the title was mostly ceremonial. We hadn't been close in years, but I remembered how she used to braid Ma's hair when she was little. How she slipped extra cookies into napkins when no one was looking. I dialed her number with shaking hands, unsure of how this would go. "Hi, Margot," I said when she picked up. "I wanted to talk to you about Christmas dinner." She sounded cheerful at first, ready to catch up, but her voice shifted the moment I told her Mia had been uninvited. "What?" "Why?" "They said it was about space," I replied. "But then my dad said something else. Called her a loser. And there's a meme going around. Zachary posted it." There was a pause. "That's disgusting," she said at last. "I didn't know." "I thank you for telling me." She didn't say more, but I could hear the wheels turning in her mind. The uncomfortable recalibration that happens when you realize people you've trusted are not who you thought. Next was Peter, my mother's colleague turned family friend. He had watched Maya grow up from the sidelines, always reserved but kind. "Peter, I just wanted to let you know Maya won't be at Christmas," I said. "Oh, that's unfortunate," he replied. "It wasn't her choice," I continued. "She was disinvited. My father said, and I quote, 'Losers don't get Christmas.'" Another silence. "I see," he said quietly. "That changes things." Call after call, I repeated the same explanation. No embellishments, no emotional appeals, just the truth. And every single time there was that moment of stunned pause. Some people offered apologies, others didn't. A few tried to rationalize, to soften it. "Maybe he didn't mean it that way. Perhaps your mother was just stressed." But most listened, most heard me. And then came the twist. I called Irene, one of my mother's oldest friends. She had known me since I was in braces and bad posture. Had sent Maya books every birthday for years. When I told her what happened, she didn't sound surprised. "I'm so sorry, Elena," she said, her voice soft. "I've known for a while." I froze. "Known what?" "That they never saw Maya as family." "Not really," she whispered. "Your mom said it once years ago. Something like, 'She's part of Elena's life, but not ours.'" I thought it was just a careless comment, but I think she meant it. The room spun. I had always suspected, the way they forgot her accomplishments, the way they posted about Zachary but never mentioned her name. I tried to explain it away as forgetfulness, as bias, as anything but what it was. Rejection. Systematic, polite, practiced rejection. "They've always been more invested in optics than people," Irene added almost apologetically. "And I think Maya remind them of everything they tried to bury, the scandal, the messiness, your independence. My throat burned. Thank you for telling me. I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner." "You just did," I replied. When I hung up, I stared at the list again. 13 names left. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel powerless. Each call wasn't just a revelation. It was a step toward reclaiming something they had taken from me without permission. My voice, my daughter's place, the truth. Over the next 2 days, our house buzzed with quiet purpose. I didn't tell Ma what I was doing, not directly. But she noticed. Of course, she noticed. She saw the notepad on the counter, the list of names with little check marks beside some, question marks beside others. She noticed the way I excused myself to take calls in the pantry, how I spent more time with my laptop than usual, how my tone shifted, less clipped, more careful. But she didn't ask. She moved through the house like a ghost, polite and helpful. She folded napkins, prepped vegetables, organized the gift bags we'd usually bring to the family dinner. Her hands were busy, her mouth quiet, the space between us filled with everything we weren't saying. At one point, I caught her standing in the hallway looking at the coat closet. Her fingers hovered over the scarf her grandmother had given her 2 years ago, then withdrew. She didn't put it on. We had always prepared for Christmas together, a tag team of efficiency and inside jokes. This year felt different, like we were standing back to back instead of side by side. And still, she said nothing. That night, Christmas Eve, I was putting a finishing touches on the table cape, my own version of tradition, when my phone rang. My mother's name lit up the screen. I stared at it for a second, exhaled, and picked up. Elena, her voice was already tense. Hi. I need to ask you something. What did you say to everyone? I paused. Excuse me. Don't play coy, she snapped. You know exactly what I mean. You've been calling people. We had 18 confirmed guests. Now it's down to 6. I waited. They're saying things that aren't true, she continued. That we uninvited Maya. That we called her names. That's not what happened. It's exactly what happened, I replied. You're twisting things. No, I said calmly. I'm just repeating them. There was silence on the other end, then a shaky breath. Elena, you're ruining Christmas. I closed my eyes. There are 18 seats at that table, I said. Just not one for your granddaughter. She didn't respond immediately. I could hear rustling in the background, the low murmur of my father asking what I'd said. She didn't repeat it. I hope you're really proud of yourself, she hissed finally. I didn't rise to it. I didn't do this. You did. You just never thought anyone would notice. Click. The call ended. No goodbye, just the cold, clean snap of a slammed door in audio form. I stood there for a moment, phone still in hand, heart thudding, not with fear or sadness, but with something steadier, conviction. When I turned around, Maya was standing in the doorway. She must have heard my voice. Her eyes searched mine, questioning without asking. I nodded once. It's okay, I said. Everything's going to be okay. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. We went back to our tasks. She folded the last batch of napkins. I arranged the wine bottles in neat lines on the buffet. The house smelled of cinnamon and roasted garlic. Outside, the snow had started again, soft and silent. By the time we were done, the table glowed with warmth, our own constellation of care. It wasn't the table I grew up with. It didn't have my mother's china or the heirloom silverware, but it had something else. It had intention. Tomorrow, the people sitting there would be the ones who chose to show up. Not out of obligation, not for appearances, but because they believed Maya belonged. And maybe finally, that would be enough. By 5 o'clock on Christmas Day, our house no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like a home. The doorbell rang twice within 5 minutes. First was Margot carrying a tray of homemade rolls and an apology baked into every fold. Then came Peter holding a bottle of aged whiskey and wearing a look that said, I see it now. One by one they arrived, some with casseroles, some with wine, some with hands trembling ever so slightly as they crossed the threshold, unsure of what they'd find. What they found was warmth. The scent of cinnamon and cloves drifted through the air. The fireplace glowed gently. Maya had set the table with mismatched plates. Ours, not the fancy ones we used to borrow from my mother. The centerpiece was a bundle of pine cones we'd collected last week, now dusted in silver spray paint. It wasn't curated. It wasn't impressive, but it was real. Maya stood beside me at the door, greeting each guest with the kind of grace I never knew an 18-year-old could possess. She smiled without force, accepted hugs without hesitation. It struck me then how powerful she looked, not in spite of everything, but because of it. These people hadn't come out of obligation. They had chosen her. By 6, the house was buzzing. Conversations layered over each other like a symphony. Laughter in the living room, clinking glasses in the dining area, soft memories resurfacing like old songs. And there was Maya in the middle of it all. Someone brought out a board game they used to play when she was younger. Another handed her a card with a bookstore gift certificate and the words for the future doctor scrolled on it. She laughed easily, head tilted back, and for a moment I saw the child she used to be. The one who believed family meant unconditional love. Maybe she still did. Or maybe she was just choosing to believe in this version of it instead. Then came the moment that caught me completely off guard. Helen walked through the door. She was one of my mother's oldest friends, someone who'd been like an aunt to me growing up. She and I had drifted over the years, more out of passive neglect than anything else. She had stayed close with my mother, even after the tension between us grew too thick to ignore. But now here she was, shoulders drawn in, eyes glassy. She carried no food, no gifts, Just a small envelope clutched tightly in her hand. "Maya," she said, voice cracking. My daughter turned, smile already forming. "Hi, Aunt Helen." Helen walked over, stopping just a foot away. And then, as if something inside her cracked open, she began to cry. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have said something years ago. I saw how they treated you. I knew it wasn't right, but I kept quiet because I didn't want to get in the middle. And that was wrong." Maya didn't flinch. She stepped forward and hugged her. Not out of duty, not out of politeness, but out of something stronger. Something that told me she wasn't just surviving this. She was transforming because of it. Helen pulled back, wiped her cheeks, and handed Mia the envelope. "It's not much, just something I meant to give you last year." Inside was a note and a necklace, simple silver, with a tiny engraved compass. "Because you're finding your own way, a tread." I watched from the kitchen doorway, heart swollen, eyes stinging. This wasn't the family we were born into. It was the one we built. Across town, in my parents' pristine dining room, only 2 chairs were filled. The roast was perfect, no doubt. The silverware gleamed. The wine aged and expensive. But the silence between my mother and father was louder than any gathering. It wasn't the meal they had envisioned. It wasn't the applause they expected. At some point during the evening, my mother, ever the curator of appearances, snapped a photo of the table, the place settings untouched, the centerpiece perfectly symmetrical. The caption she posted to the extended family group chat read, "Some people don't understand what it means to ruin Christmas. I hope they're proud of themselves." No names, no direct accusations. But the implication was heavy as stone. I didn't respond immediately. I scrolled past it while folding linens, then poured another glass of wine, smiled politely at a guest, and excused myself to the kitchen. There, with the soft clink of dishes in the background, I opened my photo album and selected 3 images. The first, a screenshot of Zachary's meme, the one mocking me school. The captions still glaring. "I diagnose you with vibes." My father's like lit up in plain view. The second, a transcript I'd typed out myself word for word from memory the moment my dad's voice rang out during that call. "Tell her lizards didn't get invited to Christmas." The third, just a sentence typed simply and coldly. They chose. I posted all 3 to the same group chat. No further explanation, no arguments, no names needed, just facts, their words, their actions, their consequences. I didn't check for reactions. I didn't watch for typing indicators. I closed the app and returned to my guests, to the warmth of the real Christmas happening under my roof. But later that night, after the last dish was washed and the last guest had left, I sat on the couch with a blanket draped over my legs. Maya upstairs winding down, and I felt my phone buzz. It was a direct message from someone I hadn't expected. Andrew. He was one of my father's closest friends, a former colleague turned loyal confidant. He had always been polite to me, distant, but never unkind. We'd never had more than a surface-level relationship. But now he had something to say. His message was short. "I thought you should know. Frank was planning to exclude Maya since October. He brought it up at our conference dinner. Said she wasn't appropriate for a public family event. Wanted to make sure she wasn't representing the family." I didn't agree, but I didn't speak up either. "I'm sorry." I reread the message 3 times, nausea curling through my gut. It hadn't been an impulsive decision. It hadn't been a miscommunication. It was deliberate, strategic, planned 2 months in advance, like a campaign, like a purge. They hadn't just excluded her. They had decided long ago that she didn't fit the image they wanted to present, that her choice, wise, humble, financially sound, was embarrassing, that she was embarrassing. And they had masked it behind space constraints, behind holiday stress, behind logistics until the facade cracked wide open. I stared at Andrew's message and typed back 2 words. "Thank you," because he had done what no one else in their camp had, acknowledged it, owned it. No spin, no defense, just the truth. I could feel something in my chest begin to loosen. Not forgiveness, not yet, but clarity. I powered off my phone and went upstairs. Maya was already in bed, her room dim and peaceful. I knocked once before entering. She looked up from her book, the edges of a smile on her lips. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. Yeah, it was a good night, and I crossed the room, brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, and sat beside her. They planned it, I said quietly. Dad didn't want you there since October. She was quiet for a moment, then she whispered, that's okay. I didn't want to be there either. It wasn't defiance, it was liberation. I kissed her on the temple, turned off the light, and closed the door behind me. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel the need to defend myself or her. They had made their choice, and we had made ours. 3 days after Christmas, on a cold, brittle afternoon, they knocked on my door. No call, no warning, just the knock, firm, familiar, like they had every right to be there. I was halfway down the stairs with a basket of laundry when I heard it. I paused at the landing, heart already quickening, the instinctive tightness in my chest flaring up before I even saw who it was. I opened the door slowly, arms full of unfolded towels. And there they were. My mother, perfectly composed in her winter coat, lips drawn in what was supposed to be a smile, but looked more like a wheeze. My father beside her, stiff and unspeaking, eyes darting past me into the house. We thought it was time to talk, she said. I didn't move. Talk about what? Her smile faltered, replaced by a fragile tone of practiced concern. Let's not make this worse than it already is. We just want to clear there. Behind her, my father shifted his weight. You're ruining this family over nothing, he muttered. That word again, nothing. We've always supported you, he added. I placed the laundry basket down slowly and deliberately and stepped outside onto the porch with them. The cold bite at my arms, but I didn't care. What I needed to say didn't require comfort. You excluded her from Christmas, I said. A holiday about family, and you laughed while doing it. My mother flinched. What didn't mean it like that? I don't care how you meant it, I said, voice steady. You meant it enough to say it, and you let everyone else laugh, too. My father exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding back his real thoughts. It was a joke. She's too sensitive. You're too sensitive. I shook my head. No, you're just cruel, and now you're surprised the consequences feel uncomfortable. My mother's voice hardened. You've twisted everything, made us look like monsters. You didn't need my help for that, I replied. She glanced around the porch as if hoping the neighbors weren't listening. This isn't how we raised you to be vindictive. My hands were cold, but my heart was warmer than it had been in years. You didn't raise me, I said. You trained me to perform, to obey, to please. And when I stepped out of line, you punished me. Now you're doing the same to Maya, and I won't let you. Her mouth opened, but I kept going. She's not a phase. She's not a blemish on your reputation. She's my daughter. She made a choice, an intelligent, responsible, loving choice. And you tried to make her pay for it. Not just by excluding her, but by ridiculing her. You orchestrated it. You planned it months ago, and now you want to sweep it under the rug because people found out. We just want to move on, my mother said softly. But there was no apology, not a word of regret, just avoidance, denial, and the desperate need to maintain their own narrative. I'm not angry, I said, and it was the truth. I'm just done. The wind picked up around us, tugging at my sleeves, but I didn't flinch. My father's voice came low, almost a growl. You'll regret this. No, I said, I won't. I stepped back inside, picked up the basket, and gently closed the door. No to slam, just a close, firm final. I stood there for a moment, hand still on the doorknob, listening to the muffled sound of their retreating footsteps. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. And I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. Upstairs, I heard Maya's door creak open. She hadn't come down. Hadn't interfered. She was learning, too, how silence can be powerful. How distance can be protection. I climbed the stairs slowly, my spine a little straighter than before. We weren't alone. We just weren't theirs anymore. The next day, I get the notification. A new message had been posted to the larger family chat, the one where extended cousins shared outdated memes and holiday recipes and old family photos that no one remembered taking. My mother had written a long paragraph, vague and flowery on the surface, but thick with implication. Some people forget the value of tradition, it read. They choose pride over peace, bitterness over family. We won't apologize for holding on to our values, even when others try to shame us for them. The replies came fast. Cousins hadn't seen in years chimed in with subtle jabs. It's sad how some people can't let go of grudges. You always hosted the best Christmases. Family isn't about perfection. It's about respect. They were painting a new narrative that I had boycotted Christmas, that I had poisoned the well, that I was bitter and envious and disruptive. Not one mention of Maya, not one acknowledgement of the words that started it all. Then late that evening, I received a private message from someone I hadn't expected. Tasha, a second cousin I barely knew. We'd talked maybe twice in our adult lives, exchanged pleasantries at weddings, nodded at reunions. She sent me an audio file. Thought you might want to hear what they're actually saying, she wrote. I hesitated for a moment before pressing play. It was a voice memo recorded from what sounded like a phone call. My mother's voice came through first, calm, clipped, rehearsed. Elena always had a flair for dramatics. She said she's jealous. I think that Zachary succeeded where Maya settled, and now she's using that to justify this whole spectacle. Another voice chimed in. My father, she's bitter. Never got over the fact that we didn't shower Mia with the same praise, but you can't reward mediocrity. The third voice was someone else, one of the distant aunts. Honestly, I don't blame them. It's embarrassing the school she picked. People talk. The audio ended. I sat in silence. I wasn't shocked. I was hollow. They didn't just think less of Maya. They believed she deserved less. I didn't realize Mia had entered the kitchen until I heard her soft footsteps. She was holding a mug of tea, her eyes already on me, her expression guarded. You okay? She asked. I nodded slowly, locking my phone screen. She set her mug down and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Was that about me? I didn't answer right away. She tilted her head. You don't have to protect me anymore. I'm not a kid. I met her gaze and something in my chest cracked wide open. They're saying I'm jealous, I whispered. That I ruined Christmas because I couldn't accept that Zachary was more impressive. Maya blinked. They really believe that? I nodded. She was quiet for a beat. Then, for the first time, she asked the question I had dreaded from the beginning. Why do they hate me? It wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't even pain. It was confusion, as if she couldn't compute how kindness, hard work, and decency had turned her into an outsider in her own family. I walked over and wrapped my arms around her. She didn't cry. Neither did I. But the silence between us said more than any tears could. They don't hate you, I said, voice low. They just don't understand you. And what they don't understand, they mock. That's on them, not you. She nodded against my shoulder. But I could feel it. The fracture, the wound, the moment when a child stops seeing their family as infallible and starts seeing them for who they truly are. It was a quiet Thursday morning, the kind where the house felt suspended in time. The dishwasher hummed in the background. Maya was upstairs on a video call with her study group, and I had just sat down with a second cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Zachary stood there, hands shoved in the pockets of his designer coat, chin tucked into a scarf that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. He looked sheepish, but not nervous, polished, but not truly apologetic. Hey, he said, like we were catching up over coffee. Can we talk? I didn't invite him in. What about? I asked, arms crossed. He gave a half shrug. Look, things got out of hand. I didn't mean for it to blow up like this. I leaned against the door frame, unmoved. You mean the meme, the laughter, the insults behind our backs. His smile faltered. It was just a joke. You know how people are online. No one meant any harm. You mocked my daughter's school, Zachary, I said. You called her a fake doctor. You think that's harmless? He shifted. I thought it was funny at the time. I didn't think anyone would take it seriously. You liked the comments. You fed the fire. And then you let your grandparents do the rest. There was a beat of silence. Then, in a tone meant to sound offhand, but came out strained, he muttered, I didn't know cutting them off would affect my rent. I blinked. What? He backtracked quickly. I just meant things have gotten tense. I didn't know the fallout would be so bad. But I was no longer listening to the spin. My mind had locked on to that one sentence. I didn't know cutting them off would affect my rent. He wasn't here to apologize. He was here because the money had stopped. The monthly transfers I had been sending my parents, small at first, then gradually larger, meant to help with groceries, heating retirement gaps. For years, I'd trimmed corners, skipped vacations, deferred repairs, all under the assumption I was being a good daughter, supporting aging parents. But the reality was clearer now. They hadn't had the money for bills. They'd been funneling it to Zachary. I stared at him, the pieces rearranging themselves in real time. You mean to tell me, I said slowly, that the money I sent them every month, they were using it to help you? He looked uncomfortable, but didn't deny it. I stepped outside, closing the door gently behind me. The cold hit harder than I expected, but the heat rising in my chest made up for it. So, let me get this straight, I said. I supported them while they humiliated my daughter, and they used that support to prop up the very person mocking her. He swallowed. I didn't ask for it. But you spent it, I snapped, didn't you? Silence. The entitlement in his posture faded just slightly, not enough to qualify as remorse, but enough to confirm everything I needed to know. I stepped back. You need to leave, Zachary. Not out. He looked like he might protest. Say something performative, but my expression must have told him it was futile. He turned and walked down the steps, scarf blowing in the wind behind him. I watched him go until he turned the corner and disappeared. Then I went back inside, closed the door, and locked it, not out of fear, but out of finality. Some debts aren't financial, they're moral, and his had come due. What I hadn't noticed in the fog of shock and rising anger was the figure standing just inside the hallway. Maya. She must have come downstairs for a break between calls. She was barefoot in pajama pants and an old sweatshirt, hair messy and damp from a recent shower. But her face was still frozen. She had heard Zachary's words. My reaction, maybe not all the context, but enough. Enough to put the pieces together. I saw it in her eyes, the understanding landing like a stone. You didn't know cutting them off would affect my rent. That one sentence had done what years of politeness hadn't. It peeled everything back. Her shoulders didn't slump. She didn't cry, but the way she looked at Zachary, sharp and glassy, was something I hadn't seen before. Not sadness, not even betrayal. It was disappointment. He saw her then, too, and his expression shifted just for a second. That flicker of guilt that only shows up when someone realizes they've been caught not in an act, but in their nature. Maya, he said, like they were old friends instead of enemies cloaked in civility. She didn't answer. She turned around, walked back upstairs without a word, and closed her bedroom door. Quiet, precise, like punctuation. I turned back to Zachary, every inch of me humming with clarity. It wasn't rage, not the hot, uncontrolled kind. It was colder, more final. You need to go, I said again, low and absolute. Elena, no. I stepped forward, and this time my voice didn't rise, didn't break. You stood in my home and admitted that you benefited from money I worked hard to earn, that I gave out of love, and that while you spent it, you also spent your time degrading the person I love most. He opened his mouth. Don't, I said. Just don't. He stood there, weight shifting awkwardly, like he was still waiting for a softer ending. But I had nothing else to give. When the door closed behind him, it wasn't dramatic, just final. I leaned against it for a moment, listening to the silence settle. Then I walked straight to the kitchen, pulled out my phone, and opened the banking app. I navigated to the section labeled recurring transfers. There it was, the line item I'd ignored for years, monthly reliable. A small but consistent outflow labeled mom and dad support. My thumb hovered over the screen for a breath, then I hit cancel. A message popped up. Are you sure you want to stop this recurring transfer? I tapped yes. It was done. There was no ceremony, no dramatic music, just a number disappearing and a weight lifting. The final string was cut because I had been carrying them for years financially, emotionally, spiritually. I had rationalized it. They were migrants. They were aging. They needed help. But help had become a leash and I wasn't wearing it anymore. Later, after I had washed a few dishes and reset the living room, I sat on the couch, letting a silence soak in. Maya came downstairs again slowly this time. She sat beside me without speaking, curled her knees to her chest. After a while, she asked, You stopped the money? Yes, I said. She nodded. eyes on the flickering candle across the room. "I didn't know," she said softly, "that you were supporting them, that they were giving it to him." "Neither did I replied. Silence again. Then she added, "It makes sense, though." I turned to look at her. "Everything always made sense for them," she said. "Just not for us." I reached over, took her hand, and gave it a squeeze. "We don't owe them anything," I said. "Not anymore." She rested her head on my shoulder, and that night, for the first time in years, I slept without waking up in the dark, wondering how much I still had left to give. A year later, the snow returned. It came in soft waves, covering the front yard in a blanket of white that glistened beneath the porch lights. Inside, our little house was quiet, peaceful, not empty, but full in the way that mattered. Maya sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, fingers tapping out answers to an online application. Across from her, a stack of printouts, internship listings, deadlines, personal statements, half-edited and annotated in her precise handwriting, the kind that looked nothing like mine, all clean lines and even spacing. She had just turned 19. Still the same bright eyes, still the same steady heart, but now more certain, more grounded. The last year had sculpted her, not hardened her, but clarified her edges. She was preparing to apply for medical internships. Her first step toward becoming a doctor for real. No debt, no shame, just quiet, determined progress. I watched from the kitchen doorway, a cup of tea warming my palms. She glanced up and smiled. "Almost done with this one," she said. "You've been saying that for an hour." "It's true this time." I chuckled and moved to sit across from her. The smell of rosemary and roasted vegetables filled the air. We'd made dinner together that evening, nothing fancy. Just roasted chicken, garlic potatoes, and a small apple pie she insisted on baking from scratch. We weren't hosting anyone this year, and that was okay. We'd received a few invitations. Margot had offered. So had Peter and even Helen, but Maya had asked if we could stay in. "Just us," she'd said. "I kind of like it that way now." I understood completely. There was a time I might have seen that as small, as a step backward, as proof that we'd been pushed out of something bigger, but not anymore. Now I saw it as intentional, as chosen, the kind of peace that comes when you stop asking people to love you correctly and start building a life with those who already do. Our living room still held decorations from last year, some handmade, some gifted. The same pine cone centerpiece now lived year-round on our bookshelf. A permanent reminder that what we built out of necessity had become something real. It had about that night 1 year ago, about the laughter in our house, the warmth, the way people showed up, not out of blood ties, but because they believed Maya deserved to be celebrated. None of them had reached out this year. Neither had my parents. And for once, their silence didn't sting. It didn't even register as a loss. It felt like an absence that made room for something better. "Mama," Maya said, breaking the quiet. "Do you remember last year when you told me we don't owe them anything?" I nodded. "Of course." I think that was the first time I believed it. She closed her laptop, folded her arms on the table, and rested her chin atop them. "I used to think family was just automatic," she continued. "That it came with holidays and obligations, and all the stuff we're supposed to do, but now I think it's more about who stays when things get hard." I felt a lump form in my throat. She smiled soft and knowing. "You stayed. You didn't exactly make it hard," I replied, brushing a hand over her hair. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us suspended in the calm. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, the lights glowed warmly. I never thought P would look like this. Quiet dinners, fewer people, no performance, but it did, and it felt earned. I thought about all the years I'd spent twisting myself into shapes to fit into someone else's idea of worth. About the money I'd sent, the guilt I'd carried, the need for validation that never came, and how all of it had melted away quietly and completely. The moment I decided to stop begging for belonging, now I was here beside my daughter in a house that buzzed with safety, not stress. And I finally understood sometimes you don't get the family you were born into, but you get to choose the one you stay with. It was 2 days after Christmas when the message arrived. An old colleague of mine, someone who still kept tabs on the academic and professional circles that me parents used to haunt, forwarded me a link. No context, just a brief line. Thought you might want to see this. The link led to a student disciplinary report, public records, tied to a certain prestigious law school. The headline didn't name Zachary outright, but it didn't need to. Anyone familiar with the last name, the timeline, or the scandal would know exactly who it was about. Drunken altercations, insubordination during a group legal clinic, inappropriate conduct in class forums, and most notably, failure to meet academic and behavioral standards expected of the institution. Dismissal effective immediately. Zachary had been expelled. No fanfare, no second chances. Rumors followed fast that he was now applying to schools lower on the national rankings list. That he was trying to pivot maybe into business, maybe into teaching, depending on who you asked. But the most ironic piece, one of the schools he'd applied to as a fullback was Crestwell Medical's pre-law certificate program, a program that didn't even require test scores, one that accepted transfers mid-year. A program 3 rungs below the med school Ma currently attended. I blinked at the screen, unsure what I was supposed to feel. Satisfaction, relief, pity, but mostly I felt nothing. I wasn't the same woman who'd craved fairness like a drug. The need for balance, for things to finally make sense, had loosened its grip on me months ago. Now, I just closed the tab, walked into the living room, and sat beside Maya on the floor. She was stringing popcorn for the tiny tree we'd set up in the corner, barely 4 feet tall. Its ornaments a mismatched collection of memories and inside jokes. She looked peaceful, steady. I handed her the needle she dropped and said, "You'll never guess who's applying to Crestwell." She raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Zachary." Her fingers paused mid-thread. "Seriously? Pre-law certificate program." A beat passed, then she snorted. Not a cruel sound, just surprised, abused. "Some traditions can end, Mom," she said. "And that's okay," I laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from the chest that doesn't carry any bitterness, just release. We finished the popcorn strand in silence, then curled up on the couch with bowls of leftover pasta and mugs of cider. Outside, the wind was picking up again, swirling flurries past the window. Inside, the lights from the tree blinked slowly, rhythmically. Maya leaned against me. "Do you ever think about going back?" she asked. To them, she nodded. "Not anymore," I said. "You?" She shook her head. "They never knew me." "Not really." "Then we're not missing much." The clock ticked quietly on the wall. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and stopped. "I think this is my favorite Christmas," Maya whispered. "Really?" Even without the 20-person dinner and forced games of charades, she grinned, especially without those. I pulled the blanket higher around us, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Next year," I said. "We'll get a slightly taller tree." "Nah," she replied. "This one's perfect." And it was because peace didn't come with matching plates or expensive wine or a room full of people smiling through clenched teeth. It came with one person who showed up every day, one person who stayed. And in the golden glow of that little living room beneath a crooked angel ornament and popcorn garland slightly too short, I finally understood what it meant to celebrate something worth keeping. We didn't need many. We just needed each other.